Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank all of you and to all of the postal employees and staff and the people that surround them that work exceptionally hard. We really do appreciate it. It is a long, cold winter in many parts of the country, and we've had some folks that are both in the field and folks that have done incredible work in distribution centers and everything else around the country, and we're exceptionally grateful for their ongoing work and their dedication to it. I hope this conversation continues a conversation towards an answer. That's been the unresolved issue for a very long time right now on the Postal Service. This issue about a quorum for the Board of Governors, though, seems to be the first item for business to be able to try to get resolved. How do we actually get that and the importance of that? What does that mean? Mr. Williams, let me start with you on this. What is the importance of getting a quorum for the Board of Governors for USPS?
Thank you, Senator. Probably a good place to begin is the mission of the Board of Governors, and that's to structure a strategy and oversee the execution of the strategy for the Postal Service and to deal with the problems that we've identified today and to provide guidance to the senior leadership of the Postal Service. That's done through a number of committees that the Board of Governors has, and with direct communications with the Postmaster General and her staff. That is very difficult. Certainly when there were no governors, a backlog began, and we've been trying to attack the backlog. We believe it's gone. We've dealt with a number of other things that could catch up on if the conversation turns that way. The huge job before us is to construct the business plan of the future of the organization that'll deal with the problems, clear out the ones that have accumulated, and look forward to serving emergent needs of customers and current needs of customers. I mentioned store-to-door and some other emerging issues in retail and other sectors of the economy. So it's been very difficult. And
how many governors are we missing right now?
There are 7 governors missing, sir. There are 2 of us present, and I think that before the committee there have been some names submitted for about 3 more of the positions.
Right, and I would recommend to the White House they just continue to be able to nominate so we can actually get this resolved. Long term, we have got to make the standard a full Board of Governors. Right now we're fighting for a quorum. That seems like an exceptionally low threshold to be able to fight for. It's just to be able to get enough to have a quorum. It'd be better to go ahead and have a full contingency of our governors. I'm going to run out of time, so I want to be able to identify several things. Mr. Todd, I want to ask you about this conversation about specific lines of business that fit the profile, but they're lines of business that don't affect the balance sheet and put everything at risk as well. That has been thrown around. What lines of business do you anticipate that USPS could take on and that would be beneficial to actually help, but that aren't necessarily a risk as well?
Good question, Senator. I know that was a recommendation from the task force report.
Right.
I would observe a couple things. The 2006 law drew a very bright line and said that the Postal Service can only offer postal products.
Right.
And so they are barred from getting into anything that's non-postal. I do think the Postal Service has tried to explore to a large extent over the last several years, pushing that envelope a bit. But again, given the lack of governors, as we were just talking about, it's critical they have that top-level oversight and also leadership to maybe explore that further. So when it comes to a postal product or service, things that we could think of now or that we couldn't think of, the sky's the limit for the Postal Service. It simply would be regulated as competitive or market dominant. But non-postal, unless the law changes, they're barred from getting into that.
Gary, what's the recommendation from the task force on that?
Let me explain the recommendation and perhaps give a few examples. The recommendation is that the Postal Service has a large retail footprint. It has many excellent federal employees.
Right.
They have a competency to provide certain services. We think the Postal Service should explore using that footprint and those employees consistent with that competency. Now, one example that I believe is in the report is the fact that the Postal Service provides services to the State Department for processing passports. So one conceivable new service within that competency would be to provide services to state, local, and federal agencies that need access to the citizenry through retail offices. I think the task force would caution about getting into anything that would entail a risk to postal operations. And there are two types of risks I think the task force is concerned with. One is getting into something that is not currently in its core competency. Given the financial turnaround facing the Postal Service in the coming years, we don't believe that it is wise to take on new businesses that require it to develop new fundamental capabilities or new human capital. It should stick within the capabilities it has now. And secondly, given its financial problems, these new businesses should not entail balance sheet risk. And so new services such as postal banking would fall outside what the task force believes would be a prudent activity for the Postal Service.
Okay. There's also a recommendation on looking at the frequency of delivery and allowing greater flexibility on the universal service obligation to also determine frequency. Talk to me a little bit about that.
So within the context of the universal service obligation, the universal service obligation covers the geographic scope of delivery, the frequency of delivery, the mode of delivery. There's a lot of attributes to it. To be clear, the task force is saying that the Postal Service, as part of the universal service obligation, should visit all addresses in the country. No one should be left out. And the network that enables that should be maintained. Frequency goes to how many days of the week does the Postal Service deliver. There is no specific recommendation to cut frequency. However, the task force recognizes that there are many things affecting how frequently mail and packages could be delivered. So, for example, the trend in package delivery is toward more 7-day delivery. It is increasing delivery. And as the Postal Service looks at implementing the universal service obligation and hopefully distinguishing essential mail versus commercial mail, perhaps it could make distinctions on the frequency between essential mail delivery, which might be required more frequently on certain routes, or commercial mail delivery, where maybe it's not as frequent. That's just an example. The idea is to let the Postal Service give the Postal Service flexibility to determine that on a financially sustainable basis.
Okay, thank you.